Hi, everybody. This is the Crazy Parents Podcast. Today, I'm going to go over the big four questions. I keep getting asked these same questions over and over many, many times since I started this podcast. The big four are: what are vaccines? What do they do? Do they work? And should we be giving them to our kids? Those are the big four questions. And I'm going to answer those in a few minutes. First, I want to go watch a video clip of a highly influential medical study that was done. Let's watch this together.
You can't do nothing right, man.
Okay, fellas, let's play some cards. Check this out, check this out. Separate these into piles, all right? This is how it's gonna be, this is how it's gonna be. The red ones, right, they're gonna be worth $100, right?
Yeah.
The green and orange ones, they're gonna be 50. The red and white ones gonna be 25. For the all orange ones, these little ones right there, make those 10.
So, if you're just listening, this show is some nurses' assistants that took all the drugs that were supposed to be given to this elderly person, and they're using it to play poker with instead of giving that to him.
Hey, Chauncey,
89.76.
put it on the dentistry bill.
All right.
And then it shows one of the housekeepers accidentally threw the pills away because she thought it was trash.
Oh, no.
And then one of the workers realized that they were all thrown away and they were all mixed up in the trash.
Yo, boss.
Yo.
Yo, remember when your Uncle Louis was real sick and he was taking all those pills to make him feel better?
Mm-hmm.
He had one big blue pill for his heart. That gave him indigestion. One red pill for his indigestion. That gave him high blood pressure. One big old horse pill for his blood. That made him fart. Then he stopped taking all those pills and he started feeling much better.
Monkey with the pills.
Call him. She threw them out.
So he makes a good point that drugs, things that are in the mainstream medical practice, like drugs, vaccines, surgeries, radiation, they don't address the root causes of health outcomes. They just attack the symptoms and the effects of whatever condition you have or the diseases, or trying to preemptively treat diseases before you have them. And they always cause more side effects than what they help.
But what about my uncle? How did he get better? He was over-medicated before. Those boys lucked into something when they lost his medication.
They what?
They lost his pills. I overheard them talking. They bungled their way into a breakthrough in Albert's treatment. Isn't it amazing the way luck can play a part in a person's recovery? He'll be back on the golf course in no time at all.
So now they lost his pills, and so now he's starting to get healthier and feel better.
Oh, what a tango, eh?
So it shows him going out dancing and at the skating rink. This is a movie from the 80s, by the way, called Disorderlies. And it shows the elderly man jogging, and the people who are supposed to be taking care of him can't keep up with him now that he's off of all these medications.
Do I feel great. And I owe it all to you guys. Now that I'm young again, I'm going to show you boys the fun I had when I was your age. We're going to go skeet shooting. We're going to go yachting. We're going on safari. And we'll go looking for women in remote spots around the world. Sound good?
Sounds good to me. Okay, so let's go into the big four questions. What are vaccines? So vaccines are a mixture of two things, minus just little preservatives and stuff that don't really affect what the treatment is. The two things are one is a sampling of the most deadly and dangerous diseases in the world. But it's not an active disease, it's in a dormant state. And there's a few different ways they can do that, but and then that's the first main ingredients. The second main ingredient is called an adjuvant. And I don't know if you've heard of that word before. ADJUVANT, adjuvant. And what that means, it's like a nice sounding word, which means some of the most deadly toxic chemicals that you can find if you look over the whole world. That's what an adjuvant is. Okay, so why do we have to mix adjuvants with the sample of the disease to get it to work as a vaccine? Because unlike back in the really, really old days, where they would just literally just give them a little sample of the actual disease and like be there to take care of them and help them survive through it, and then their body would build immunity. That was pretty risky. So now they have this dormant state of the disease, but the problem is the body doesn't see it as much of a threat, so it doesn't build up a lot of immunity antibodies to that disease. So they have to introduce a toxic chemical, extremely toxic, to like agitate the immune system and activate your immune system pre when it doesn't really need to, so that it will attack that highly toxic chemical that you're putting the adjuvant they call it, which is a nice way of saying highly toxic chemical. Um, and your body will try to get rid of that, and at the same time, that'll be mixed with this dormant state of the disease, which it'll attack that as well, because like might as well while I'm here, might as well attack this thing, and then it creates antibodies for that disease, dormant disease. That's how the modern vaccines work. Um, and so the main problem that I see from all my studies and from listening to the highest vaccine safety experts in the world talk about it, these adjuvants, these highly toxic chemicals are what's really causing the damage in people. And I'm not getting into the other vaccines, which are not vaccines, which are mRNA, which the COVID. I'm not going to say it's a vaccine because it's not. It's a genetic coding sequence. It's a totally different system. So I'm not going into that. I'm talking about what we call vaccines today for the last 45 years, 50 years, almost 50. Um, is this chemical compound mixed with a dormant state of certain diseases. Now, they used to use some of the most deadly, most dangerous toxic chemicals in the world, which was mercury. Mercury is like one of the most toxic things you can put in your body. And that's what they used to use. And then it was so people rose up and like, why are you putting mercury in our kids' bodies? And so they're like, oh, okay, we'll stop putting mercury in it. And so they switch it to aluminum, which is just a tiny bit less toxic. So it will melt their brain system just a little bit less than mercury. But if you I looked up on Wikipedia. I can't believe this Wikipedia page is still unedited. And it's still here because the things I found in this is crazy. This is just on the open internet. Cannot believe they didn't censor this. So I looked up immunologic adjuvant, which is the actual chemicals that they put into vaccines. That's what immunologic adjuvant means. Okay, so and there's a few different things that they use to create these adjuvants, these chemical substances that are highly toxic to your body. It can't be any other way because that's how it gets your body to fight the substance of the vaccine and then create the antibodies for that whatever diseases, hepatitis, measles, mumps, whatever it is you're trying to, rubella, like these diseases that I don't know. I guess they used to be a problem when people still, you know, drank out of the same water that they use for the toilet or whatever. But I don't see these diseases being a problem. If you have clean water and fairly healthy food to eat, I don't see these being a problem anymore. But here we are, almost 50 years later, still giving them. Why are we still pumping our little kids full of these things? Because it prints trillions of dollars a year and it pays a ton of people's paychecks. That's why we're still doing it. Okay. And so on this Wikipedia page, if they don't take it down while I'm reading it, I'm just going to pray that they don't. If I scroll down a little bit, I see where it says, what does adjuvants do to humans? Well, one of the first things it talks about is that these aluminum adjuvants were suggested in these studies to play a role in the development of Alzheimer's. Okay, and if you don't know what Alzheimer's is, it's a person whose brain is deteriorating and melting and stopping working. That's what Alzheimer's is. And it usually happens in older people, but it doesn't have to. It can happen at any age. It's just a deterioration of their brains, melting their brain. Okay, so that's what these things that they're using. This is on the immunologic adjuvant page, saying this is what they do to humans. They cause Alzheimer's. Studies find. Okay, what do they do to animals? Maybe it's not that bad. Aluminum adjuvants have caused motor neuron death in mice when injected. Okay, motor neuron death. What does that mean? It means it melted the brain of the mouse until it stopped working. And this is what they're putting in our babies' bodies. And does anybody else see a problem with that? Okay, so what I'm about to show you is leaked footage from the highest authorities in the entire world on vaccine safety. It was a meeting of all of them that came together in Geneva, Switzerland, from all over the world. These are the highest authorities in vaccine safety, and this is what they're going to say. And their terms that they use are kind of coded so that they all know exactly what they're talking about. But if the footage got leaked, then the average person who does not research this day and night might not understand what they're saying. So I'll pause it after somebody makes a statement and I'll tell you what they really are saying. I'll translate it for you.
We really don't have very good safety monitoring systems in many countries, and this adds to the miscommunication and the misapprehensions because we're not able to give clear-cut answers when people ask questions about the deaths that have occurred due to particular vaccine, and this always gets blown up in the media. One should be able to give a very factual account of what exactly has happened and what the cause of deaths are, but in most cases there's some obfuscation at that level.
So what she said is that instead of doing research on what's causing the deaths and the injuries from vaccines, it's just being covered up.
First accusation is it is the adjuvant. And yet, without adjuvants, we are not going to have the next generation of vaccines. And many of the vaccines that we do have, ranging from tetanus through to HPV, require adjuvants in order for them to work. I give courses every year on how do you develop vaccines, how do you make vaccines. And the first lesson is, while you're making your vaccine, if you can avoid using an adjuvant, please do so.
Okay, I'll translate what he just said. What the hell are we doing to the next generation of our kids by pumping them full of these things?
It seems to me they multiply the reactogenicity in many instances. And therefore it seems to me that it is not unexpected if they multiply the incidence of adverse reactions that are associated with the antigen but may not have been detected through lack of statistical power in the original study.
What he just said is that these chemicals that we're pumping into people are ruining their health, and we're not studying that.
The major health concern which we are seeing are accusations of long-term effects.
And again,
I don't need to translate that.
as you mentioned, pre-licensure clinical trials may not be powered enough. It's also the subject population that you administer the adjuvant to, because we've seen data presented to us where an adjuvant, a particular adjuvant added to a vaccine antigen did really nothing when administered to a certain population, and it's usually the elderly, compared to administering the same formulation to younger age strata. So these are things which need to be considered as well and further complicate safety and effectiveness evaluation of adjuvants combined with vaccine antigens.
Let me translate what she just said. When we give these highly toxic chemical-filled vaccines to adults, it usually doesn't melt their brains to the point where they can't function anymore. But when we give them to kids, it does melt their brains.
Where at 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks, a child is being given different antigens from different companies. And these vaccines have different adjuvants, different preservatives, and so on. Something crosses my mind. Is there a possibility of these adjuvants, preservatives, cross-reacting amongst themselves? Have there ever been a study on the possibility of cross-reactions from the panel members that you can share the experience with us?
The guy from Nigeria is like the only person in this group that I actually think I might trust a little bit, and he's asking the right questions.
We have a very wobbly health professional frontline that is starting to question vaccines and the safety of vaccines. When the frontline professionals are starting to question, or they don't feel like they have enough confidence about the safety to stand up to it, to the person asking them the questions. I mean, most medical school curriculums, even nursing curriculums, in medical school, you're lucky if you have a half day on vaccine.
Let me translate what she just said. The medical industry is screwed. Okay, if this wasn't bad enough, these exact same people who talk in coded speech in private meetings about how they're melting kids' brains and we're not studying it and we're not training our medical professionals correctly on what we're really doing and what's really happening. Why is that? I'll give you the answer why. Because all of the politicians are bought off, so there will never be a law stating that you have to have these studies done, long-term studies, like the scientist from Nigeria said. Where's the 4-week study? Where's the 10-week study? Where's the 14-week study? Where's the cross-vaccination studies? They're not doing them. Why? Because the vaccine companies make trillions of dollars a year off of the CDC's childhood vaccination schedule, and that trillions of dollars gets pumped out to all the politicians to buy them off. That's why. And now these same people who will say this stuff in private will put their makeup on and get in front of a nice high-res camera with good lighting and look straight in the camera, minus the times when they're blinking and trying not to look away because they're lying, and say vaccines are perfectly safe and effective. You don't believe me? Look at this. This lady, she was the first one to talk on this video, on this leaked video. There's another video of her, the exact same person, going on TV in front of the whole world and saying this.
Vaccines are very safe. If someone gets sick after vaccination, it is usually either a coincidence, an error in administering the vaccine, or very rarely a problem with the vaccine itself.
Yeah, rarely. Try millions of kids are having their brains melted. Rarely. Rarely. It's starting to slip. They're starting to lose control, no matter how much money they pay off politicians. And trust me, every politician is bought off. Even, I'm going to offend a lot of people who love Donald Trump, but he's bought off by the vaccine companies just like every other politician. They paid him millions of dollars to get him to let it go and not fight this. And we're ruining the next generation of our kids. We're literally melting their brains. There's only 2 politicians that I know of for sure that are not bought off by the vaccine companies. That is Nicole Shanahan and RFK Jr. Those are the only 2 that I know for sure are fighting against it. Everybody else is on the take. All politicians in the whole world, not just the U.S. Trust me, I've been around the world this last month. Same exact thing is happening everywhere. These people are from everywhere. This is not just a U.S. thing. This is the entire world. It's a worldwide scam led by Bill Gates, Anthony Fauci, the WHO, and the CDC, and the NIH. Okay, so I answered the first 2 questions. What are vaccines? What we think of as modern vaccines, minus the COVID vaccines, because those are something different when they're not vaccines, the way it's actually described in the modern language. So we know what they are. We know what they do. They're supposed to build up an immunity to one specific disease when there's hundreds and thousands of diseases in the world that we could get, where our bodies are being bombarded by diseases and cancer cells and all kinds of crazy stuff all the time, every moment of every day. And we should be taking vitamins, exercising, and getting healthy so that we can fight that naturally. That's the way our bodies are meant to do it, not by cutting it out, by burning it out with radiation, and by pumping our bodies full of toxic chemicals. That's not the way our bodies work. But for the last 45 years, vaccines have been unregulated, so they jump on the money train. So the third question is, do vaccines work? The answer to that is yes, they work. If you let your doctor pump your baby full of hundreds of shots of these chemicals, chances are very high that they're not going to get hepatitis B, which is usually what prostitutes get or whatever. I don't know. Sharing dirty needles. So if that's what your greatest fear is for your baby, is that they're going to become a prostitute or share a dirty needle and get hepatitis B, then, and you're more afraid of that than melting their brains with hundreds of toxic chemicals pumping into their body when their bodies are at a tiny little fragile, highly developmental stage, the first 5 years of their life, especially the first 3, if not the first 5, they should not be anywhere near our kids. And that answers the fourth question: is do I think we should be giving these to our kids? Heck no. Heck no, we should not be giving this to our kids. If you're an adult and you're required by law because of your job or a place that in the world that you're going, you have to get a vaccine. I've had to do that. When I went to a trip to Africa, I had to get a yellow fever vaccine by law, or else I wouldn't be allowed to go. And that was my choice, and I was an adult. But to give these to kids and risk a highly chance of their melting their brains? No, heck no. Get out of here. Okay, so the last thing I want to share with you is this conversation, which I've listened to a lot of conversations over the last 8 months about the subject, countless hours. This conversation I'm going to share these clip with you right now is the most important conversation of our time in culture. And this is a conversation between two people that I believe are at the highest height of influence in the culture right now. And this is when history looks back 50, 60, 70 years from now, this is the conversation they're going to look to.
I like them because they keep people from locking in, but one of the things that I wanted to make sure I did in this conversation is not interrupt you. Because it's very frustrating for me when I'm hearing people talk in these what should be long-form conversations about very important and nuanced things. And, you know, I think one of the things that happens is people are very concerned with letting you say things that is going to get them in trouble or get their channel in trouble. Like there's people that are doing a lot of self-censoring. And I think they're doing that also when they're having these conversations with you because they want to establish right away that they have problems with you. And they have problems with some of the positions that a lot of people have problems with. I was one of those people. So when I had heard of you in the past, before I had read your book and before I'd met you, I had no information on you. But there was this narrative. And this narrative was you were anti-vax and you believed in pseudoscience and you were kind of loony. I didn't look into it at all. I just took it at face value because that's what everybody had said. And in my mind, vaccines have been one of the most important medical advancements in human history, saved countless lives, protected children. And I thought very strongly that they were important. I didn't have any information on that either. This is also just a narrative that I've adopted from cursory reading of news articles and, you know, not really getting into the subject at all. Then the pandemic happens. And I had quite a few very reasonable, liberal people, rational people, people that I trusted their mind, recommend The Real Anthony Fauci, your book. And I'm like, Robert Kennedy wrote a book about Anthony Fauci? Like, what is this going to be about? Like, this is my initial reaction. You've got this, what I perceive to be a kind of fringy thinking, you know, almost conspiracy theorist type person that's not based in fact what their argument was. And he had written a book on Anthony Fauci. And this was right around the time where I was, you know, I was very concerned with the way things were going, that people were just blindly trusting that there was only one way out of this. That was kind of bothering me, particularly when I had known that so many people had gotten the virus and been fine. So I'm like, well, what's the reality of this? So then I read the book. And I've talked about it multiple times on the podcast, but if what you were saying in that book was not true, I do not understand how you are not being sued. You would instantly, immediately be sued. The book was very successful. It sold a lot of copies, but it was mysteriously absent from certain bestseller lists. People were not promoting that book at all. But through word of mouth and through the time that we live in, through this time where there was so much uncertainty and people were very confused and also suspicious. They were suspicious that they're being told a narrative. And they were starting to remember that, hey, this has happened in the past. These kind of narratives about medications, they have happened in the past. They just never happened where this is like the whole country is being convinced that this is the way to do it. So I read your book. And by the end of the book, it was so disturbing that sometimes I had to put it away and just read fiction for a few days. I was like, I don't want this in my head right now, you know, because I listen on audio. And a lot of times I'm listening in the sauna. So I'm listening while I'm already getting tortured. So it's 185 degrees and I'm listening to this book that if it's telling the truth just about the AIDS crisis, just about the use of AZT, just about all of it. So I'd seen numerous interviews with you and, you know, you seemed very reasonable and very rational. And then I was like, is this possible that this is the guy that's telling the truth? Is this possible that everyone that I know that had these strong opinions of you, that most of them at least, were like me? They had formed these opinions through a glance at a headline, someone talking about you on a television show. And so then we run into each other in Aspen. Just randomly.
That was the weirdest moment because we were both staring at each other.
Yeah.
And then we almost did it like a full 360.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed you walking. I'm like, that is. So I said, hey, what's up?
Okay, I'm not gonna play the whole podcast, but this conversation is, like I said, the most important conversation of our time. I recommend that you all listen to it, tell all your friends, relatives, enemies to listen to it, because this conversation, which I cannot believe it's on YouTube. YouTube just unlocked it and allowed it to be on there a few weeks ago. I cannot. This conversation lays out the entire scam and what they're doing to the future generation of our kids. So please listen to the conversation between Joe Rogan and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I pray for my kids that the one that's damaged will recover through God's grace, and that I pray that if your kids are damaged, if any of them are damaged, anybody in your family or friends, pray for their healing and restoration through God's grace. And I'm just going to leave you with a little moment that I had with my son, Kale. I was at church, and it was Father's Day, and I was holding him because he can't sit still. He gets very agitated. He has like one little spot in our house where he will sit still for a few minutes, and that's it. And if he's not in our house in that one little spot, he's just bouncing off the walls. So I have to hold him when we're in church if he's not occupied with some activity. And we were singing to God. We were singing, you're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. That's who I am. And I was thinking, I don't think I'm a good father for letting this happen to my son. I was at one of the lowest spots I've been in a long time. I mean, I have a lot of depression that I go up and down all the time, but that was a really low spot. And just at that moment, my son Kale turned to me and did something he rarely does. He looked me straight in the eyes, just like a normal look, and smiled. And then he leaned in and he kissed me on the cheek. And I felt like he was saying, I forgive you, Dad.